Good evening all. Good evening to all of you. Hope I am audible and visible. Welcome to ProdEgyIAS. This is Ashutosh and we are going to discuss the paper 1, Public Administration. Just give me a minute. Is it audible properly? Okay, if I am clearly audible, let's start. So, today's day was Judgment Day, right, for most of you. You must be tired from your day's effort, 6 hours almost of writing, right, and maybe years and years of hard work that goes into one particular day, right. So optional is obviously a very, a lengthy, or quite, you can say, taxing paper for any UPSC aspirant. Especially more so when you have to write a lot and at the same time you have to think a lot, right? So these two things are quite difficult to do at the same time, thinking and writing both at the same time. Not easy to do it, right? But let's say the things are over, right? There is always light at the end of the tunnel and today is your free day. So most of you might have definitely done, not might have done well. Definitely you would have put in all your effort which you have been doing since long time, right, almost a year now. So as we can see, the paper is there is nothing secret about it, right? As usual, we always say unit 1 of paper 1 is very important. Paper 2 thematic classification is very important, right? As we do thematic classification, theme by theme classification, micro topics and various undercurrents of various topics, we understand that UPSC has a clear pattern or a way of thinking, right? Like every time I tell students, when we are doing unit 1, majority of the teachers teach from unit 2, right? We teach from unit 1, so that is one different strategy that we follow all the time. And many times students get bored, yes, maybe studying those same ideas for a long period of time. But most of you who are giving or appearing for the first paper today might have felt the same, getting bored, right? Bored in the sense you might have encountered the same term again and many times again. That is NPM and post-NPM, neoliberal, right? We always emphasize on focusing on post-NPM developments, right? As usual, the paper is not tough, it's not very complicated. I would say it's a mixed bag. There are average questions and there are good questions, right? But overall, I would call this paper to be above average, right? Quite scoring. The best part is that there is no need for mugging, right? As far as other humanities are concerned, there is a lot of mugging which might be needed, right? Some of you might be willing to ask something, right? Okay. So, yes. I can make out most of you are sleeping right now. Fine, but that's okay. So, as usual, the paper is conceptual. Fine. Conceptual paper means that you don't have to mug up. Right? Understanding is the major part. Right? We always focus on conceptual understanding. That takes little time, but once it is built, it does not require anything else. So, let us say we'll not linger on. So, we'll start with the paper. We'll deal with paper 1 today. And detailed discussions will follow over a period of time. Right now we will be focusing more on helping you understand what was the nature of the question that was asked. Fine. So let's see. This is paper 1, part A, right? Section A. I hope it is visible because I have not curated the paper as of now. We have taken the paper as it is. Fine, one of the students sent it and we used it. Now see. So section A, question 1A, like I said, as usual, 2-3 things are very important. Like I said, paper is conceptual. Conceptual paper is always good because it always keeps good students in the forefront. Right? When I'm saying good students, that means obviously people who work little hard, who think little more, right, and have more passion for understanding the interlinkage between different topics, right? Majority of the candidates want some pointers and some facts or some template, right? So obviously the examination becomes more biased towards people who present things, right, rather than know things. So this paper is good. It is good for the people who know things. Fine. So it is conceptual, right, above average, right. I would say it's good for everyone, most of the people who can understand and write, right, nothing complicated, less theoretical, which is good thing, right. Otherwise, if a lot of scholars are asked, it creates a lot of problem for these students, right. So here questions are quite clear cut. Yes, some of them are definitely complicated, no doubt. But then you always have an option to leave those questions. Fine. So my take would be that a very good student, right, definitely can come in the range of 130. Good student who writes well properly, 130 to 150, good range, he can score the marks. Fine. Like every time I emphasize, good here means the people who are eager to learn and think, right? Not the people who are eager to just cut, copy and paste. So there's a difference. Now let's start with section A. First question. Imperfect market and political factors limit the application of public choice approach, right? Obviously, it is a criticism of the public choice approach. So the question focuses on, right, the public choice approach feels, if you, obviously all of you must be knowing it, right, even beginners can understand a little bit. So public choice approach was a model of market-based administration or a replacement of state by market. Various scholars like Niskanen, Ostrom, Patrick Dunleavy, Kenneth Harrow, Duncan Black, right, and James Buchanan, Niskanen, many scholars have contributed to this idea. Many schools of thought have contributed to this idea, and they, all of them, summarized the public choice approach as the replacement of the state by market. Or you can say the monopoly of the government and the market to be replaced by competitive systems of the state, and the bureaucracy to be replaced by competitive systems like market. Fine. So imagine if the government is providing all the goods and services and manufacturing it, right? Then government can set the price. Even if the prices are low and it is for the welfare of everyone, right? Still government is having the monopoly over them. Once government has monopoly, the corruption will come into picture, right? That is public choice approach. So it had basic idea. So we can talk about public choice approach briefly, what it was, right? And obviously the application of public choice approach is based on the assumption that markets are good, right? Markets are good, policies are made in a fair manner, right? State performs its function, market performs its function. The state is not controlling or state is not restricting the growth of market, right? That is the question. But if market is not competitive and state is trying to unnecessarily hinder the growth of the market, competitive market, then definitely, right, the public choice approach would fail, because it rests on the assumption that markets are competitive, though it is not true. There is crony capitalism. Fine, as you can see, the debate going on in India also, right? There's a need for corporate ethics. There is need for corporate or fair practices in the market mechanism. If they are not, right, unnecessary regulation is there, right? Corruption is there. Second, ARC talks about collusive corruption. If you know, market, state, all of them are involved in corruption. So if you take this view that unless the policies are made properly, right, unless the market conditions are competitive, whatever idea public choice approach is giving is not acceptable, right? If you want, you can use Amartya Sen's quote. It is not about state versus market, but it is about state with market, or it is about who does what best. Fine. So that is the idea of the question. The detailed analysis will do over a period of time. Fine. So imperfect market and political factors limit the application. Yes, it does. Definitely. Fine. 1B. This is direct statement of Bernard's theory. Right. The fine art of decision making is not making decisions that others can make. Right. Obviously, Bernard in his book the functions of the executive. Very popular book, right? Functions of the executive. Bernard says that Bernard is one of the pioneers of decision making, right? Even before Simon. So Bernard says that a good leader, right? A good executive is one who has two very important aspects. One, legal expertise, specialization obviously over his knowledge, managerial skills, and other is the moral and ethical skill. So a good manager is one, a good leader is one, in fact, not manager, who knows when to make decisions by himself and when to allow others to make decisions, right? That is, he does not capture the leadership by position. He does not control the leadership by position, but he somewhere agrees to leadership by function. Those who are capable, he allows them to work. He allows them to act. And that is also a very important trait, or a very important, you can say, feature of good leadership, right? That is the idea of Bernard. So Bernard says decision making is an art. Decision making involves obviously choices. Decision making also includes a leadership ability, a leader who not only has technical, legal, or subject-wise competence, but he also has moral and ethical competence. And how this moral ethical competence is visible, right? When he understands the people below him, he allows them to make decisions where probably he cannot make better decisions. Fine, that is the idea. So you can write about it, right? You can also promote that why collectors, why people sitting at the top, secretaries, chief secretaries, heads of the departments, right? They should also try to delegate majority of their functions to the lower levels, or they should allow the people at the lowest level, right, to exercise their leadership abilities, right? And at times they should take the back seat. Only then probably effective administration can function, right? That is the idea. So definitely, right, leaders should nurture leadership, and they should allow the people who are capable to get opportunity in the organization. Fine. That's the question. Let's see 1C. Fine. Has the media nixed its role in holding the government accountable and ensuring transparency? Argue. Now, obviously, you have to argue. So it can be both ways. Has media somewhere manipulated, lost the credibility to make the governments accountable? Obviously, there are issues, right? There are situations where we can talk about it, but yes, let's not be very specific and talk totally anti-government, but let's say, yes, the role of media is to be a neutral arbiter of issues, problems and facts, right? As you know, it is the fourth estate. Obviously, you have to talk about what is the role of media. But because media is devoid of certain things, right? One is the regulation, accountability, right? Ethical code of conduct. Obviously, they have ethical codes, right? Press Council of India talks about it. But in general, right, worldwide or globally also, the growth of social media somewhere has denied or reduced the moral and ethical control, that is self-control over media. So the usual media and the growth of the social media, right, somewhere both have impacted the neutrality and unbiased nature of media. Recent issues with Pakistan, you see that blogger who was spying for Pakistan, many other bloggers or many other social media influencers were caught for that. In general, the media, right, the kind of issues it raises, the kind of opinions which it converts into a news, then yellow journalism, paid journalism, then somewhere patronized journalism, right, politicized journalism. So there are various factors, there are various reasons also by which the media's accountability and fairness has been questioned, right? Even the government's consciousness to control and regulate media is quite high today. So you can bring these perspectives, right? Like I told you, there are several issues, several examples, right, where it is quite evident. So media activism in the areas where it is not needed, whereas media inactivism in the areas where it is needed, right? So judiciary has also taken certain stand, if you know. So you can write about it, but don't overdo it. Fine, don't write excess 10-mark question here, right? So you can argue that yes, the transparency is essential. It's the bedrock principle of media. Fine, and somewhere there is a need for the media, right, to have some you can say self enforced code of ethics, right, or code of conduct, right? Obviously you should not recommend for controlling the media as such, right, which will not be correct. Fine. Is Herbert Simon justified in criticizing some principles of administration as proverbs? Yes, obviously this is the criticism in paradigm 2, right, the era of challenge or crisis of identity. Definitely Herbert Simon's criticism is very important criticism. The book that he writes, Administrative Behavior, right, it highlights that how the classical scholars, classical studies did not have empirical validity or scientific basis. Why is he talking about lack of scientific basis? Fine. Why is he talking about? There are certain, right? So he says there is no factual basis. Majority of this knowledge is heuristic. It is mostly based on observation, experience, hearsay. Fine, like Taylor, he talks about Taylor, that all the claims that Taylor has made, who can verify all that claim? Fine, so he criticizes it. He also finds incompatibility between the principles like span of control and hierarchy. Fine, accountability and unity of command, specialization and unity of command. Fine, centralization, decentralization. So there are various paradoxes, right, or various kind of contradictions which are visible in different principles. If there are contradictions, obviously they cannot be principles who can be fitted or implemented together. So he highlights it, and obviously his analysis on decision making later, fact value analysis or fact value dichotomy, fact value continuum that he talks about. Don't bring all that, but just for the sake of understanding, I'm saying that he somewhere yeah, Shubham, voice, anybody let me know if the voice is low or is it breaking? There can be two possibilities. Anyone, if you are. So Simon criticizes these principles as proverbs which are without any verification, factual basis, and that is why he proposes the model of logical positivism. Okay, fine. So you can check on your end also, because some students are saying it is fine. Right. So yes, he is justified. Obviously don't write yes, Simon, but yes, you can agree that yes, that is criticism is justified on what? On the following grounds. What is the alternative Simon proposes? Logical positivism, right? A fact value analysis, reduction of facts, values, and enhancement of facts. Fine. So let us see. So 1D, right? 1C. This is also interesting, very interesting. They have not asked very typical conceptual question in administrative law, but a very simple question, right? Otherwise there would have been dicey, criticism of dicey, Anglophone versus Francophone, continental system, common law system, Dwight administrative, but simple question they have asked. Administrative law has evolved from the need to create a system of public administration under law, right? The simple aspect of question is, right, how the system of authority must or be restricted in terms of the use of discretion. This is the idea on which you have to write. The need for administrative law emerges from the need to regulate the power of administration or unchecked arbitrary authority of administration. As you know, the society becomes more complicated, cyber warfare, hacking, cyber terrorism, chemical warfare, internal security, external security, terrorism, environmental governance, and many other things emerge. The role of administration becomes challenging. Logically, it gets more power, fine, or it has to be given more authority. How this authority should not go unchecked, unfettered, uncontrolled, unregulated, right? That is the idea. So the need for administrative law emerges mainly from the regulation or restriction on the unchecked arbitrary exercise of power by the administration. Write it, right? If you are, though it is 10-mark question, but yes, you can use like ADM Jabalpur case, Keshwanand Bharti judgment, you can use them also to identify, right, the concept of constitutionalism and constitutional morality. That is also very important, right? The public interest is the driving force. Fine, this is what the question is. Okay, good evening. So it's easy, right, for you to understand that way, that somewhere the question was quite easy and direct. So elucidate, simplify it, right, clarify it, right, simplify the idea, elaborate the idea. Elucidate means obviously the more you simplify, the better it is. Fine. So why certain systems are created, why accountability is important, right? How administration suffers from corruption and monopoly, and that has to be checked. What are the mechanisms by which we are checking them, right? Tribunals, courts, judicial review, many ways of doing it. Fine. Now, so let's take, fine, the question, next question. Question number 2, right? So we are doing it briefly. Detailed discussion we will do over a period of time, because that will take a lot of time. Fine. So इसने खुद ही देखो बहुत सारा. Let me just erase certain things, right? No. 2A. New public management has actually been a transitory state in evolution from traditional public administration to what is here called new public governance. Examine. Fine. Now the question says that two things are very clear. One, the question is somewhere bringing the perspective that NPM is a kind of transition from the traditional public administration is it audible, visible properly? Is it? Okay, just give me 1 second, let me just check. I think it is stuck, video is stuck for some time. Is it audible to you? Fine, kindly ignore this part. There might be some, I think, internet issue. Just give me a second. Is there a problem, technical? Is it audible again? There was some internet issue, I think. Okay, Dwij, Navneet, Hemant, Shubham, Advait, right. There was a slight delay, fine, let us ignore that delay. So let's come back. NPM, now this is second day. Question number 2A, NPM has actually been a transitory state in evolution from traditional public administration to what is here called new public governance. So traditional PABAD is basically bureaucratic. So the criticism of the bureaucratic, right, you have to talk about the traditional public administration which was bureaucratic. What were the problems in the traditional bureaucratic model, right, to which NPM was a response. As you know, NPM comes under the neoliberal movement. Fine. So neoliberal movement, NPM comes, and NPM is market-based administration, a market-based system of administration. Obviously, it is not talking about market, it is talking about reforming public administration on the lines of market, right? So the book Osborne and Gabler, Reinventing Government, Christopher Hood, Follett's contribution, and many other scholars, as you know. So you can talk about them and identify what was the change, why this was there, right? Obviously, is NPM the final stage of evolution, right? Is it the ultimate stage of evolution? No, because NPM also had its own drawbacks. So obviously you have to highlight the reasons for the failure of NPM, the critique of the NPM, right? As you know, there are multiple critiques of NPM, like promoting crony capitalism or entrepreneurial bureaucracy, a bureaucrat who is more concerned with product and service delivery, less with ethics and constitution, the one who is more concerned with his incentives and less with justice or public interest, right? More polished manager's orientation in bureaucracy, right? These things probably don't work for public administration. So you had drawbacks. Obviously there was need to reform traditional. The traditional got a competition, the traditional got an alternative in the form of NPM, right? But NPM was not absolute, it had its own pitfalls. Write it. Fine. If you identify the pitfalls of NPM, right, what was the natural course of action, right? Either move towards new public service. Fine. That is also a model given by Denhart and Denhart. Fine. Or neo-Weberian state. Fine. Or eventually the new public governance. See. So new public governance, Osborne and other scholars are there, right? They highlight the idea that, okay, yes, there is a need to collaborate. The developments which were there previously, the orientation of bureaucracy, the tools and techniques of NPM, the sensitivity of NPS, right? How these multiple actors which are part of governance model, how these multiple actors are going to coexist together. What will be the issues and the conflicts that will emerge, and eventually how that can be settled. So when you say third party governance, networked governance, like Nicholas Henry uses the idea, when you use these models, you also have to understand that theoretically the idea is very good that we'll associate with others, or all of us will come together and form a network. But in reality, running those systems is very difficult. So it is obvious that eventually state, market versus state, state with market, then state, market and people, citizens, right? Then non-government organization, then other third-party actors, eventually how they will come together. They will come together in a framework called new public governance, right? That is the question about you could have written, right? We study that. All the post-NPM developments we have already studied, right? So this question, or technically all this, like I told you, 40% is unit 1 of the entire paper. Those who study unit 1 properly, every time we say, give time to that, right? But majority of you, obviously not our students, but majority of the students studying unit 1 after they have completed most of the other topics, right, they will never understand paper. That is the biggest drawback which many of the aspirants take to the UPSC exam, especially for public administration optional. So if you're not conceptually clear, you will not be able to make out what these questions are saying. Fine, so examine, correct, and that's true, that eventually a network will be created. The network is a consequence of various alternatives that have emerged over a period of time, right? When we talk about Gram Sabha, when we talk about local governance, when we talk about public collector, Zilla Panchayat, Gram Panchayat, SHG, NGO, right? How these networks are emerging. So NPG can definitely explain it better. Fine. So rowing to steering to serving to collaborating, right? That is how the evolution has taken place. Fine. 2B, MP Follett, again, like we said, very important. Follett is always important, right? Understanding Follett may be a nightmare itself, but those who understand Follett can easily apply her anywhere, right? Majority of your questions, local governance, community participation, power, decentralization, centers around Follett. So question says, Mary Packer Follett pioneered the evolution of socio-psychological approach to the study of organization. Obviously pioneered, yes, one of the pioneers, no doubt. So this, what is this socio-psychological approach? As you know, keeping humans and human behavior at the center, trying to focus on the human aspect of organization, right? Viewing organization as a social system. That is Follett's contribution. Right? She views that it is the ideas like doctrine of whole and interpenetration, how the multiple factors are interrelated, they are interdependent. And they are also in interaction with the outside, that is environment, ecology. So she talks about social system, open social system. Fine. So she is one of the pioneers? Yes, she is one of the pioneers. In her book Creative Experience or Dynamic Administration, she talks about the understanding of administrative system or organizations in general, right? Whatever the nature of organization be, organizations to be from a totally different perspective from the classical studies. She was born in the era of classical theories, but she had the mind and the heart of the behavioralist or postmodernist. So you can write briefly about Follett, give these ideas, right, and then continue that, yes, what does Follett talk about? So her concept on power, her idea of authority, find functional authority, her concept of law of situation, fine, then understanding of the psychology of the subordinates or the people on whom power authority is exercised, right? Then she talks about order, she talks about leadership, she talks about coordination, fine, and many other aspects. So her ideas, conflict resolution, the biggest concept, right, integration, her ideas definitely reflect that somewhere, right, she was viewing organizations totally from the human perspective, the perspective of the experience of the humans. How do they understand, how do they experience, and how do they accept or reject what happens in the organization? So it is not the rules, regulations or procedures or structure that define how people will act, but it is human experiences, right, that defines how they are going to act. So her ideas definitely had huge influence, huge impact on later scholars like, you know, Urwick, or you can say Metcalfe, then your socio-psychological theories like even Maslow, McGregor's idea of conflict resolution. Kindly write it, right? If you write it, it gives a better sense of understanding. So you can write Elton, Mayo and Follett both have one extensive influence. Obviously you don't have to write about Mayo, but you have to use Mayo because they both pioneered the social psychological approach around 1920s. So you have to write about it. Fine, if you see this question is 15 marks, obviously don't write too much again, but if you want very briefly, you can also add few criticisms, or if you want practical application, right? Follett's ideas are fundamental to governance today. Follett's ideas are fundamental to administrative reforms today. Follett's idea help us understand how contingency or situational models should be used, right? Why adaptation is necessary, why we have somewhere the understanding of the dynamic nature of organizations, right? So use it, apply it, also give some criticism that though her ideas were too idealistic for industrial revolution, she could not become that popular because of it, but her ideas have influenced later generations, right? Today also her ideas are quite radical compared to the times. So you can, right, like Ross Barker's criticism, or many others have said she is too idealistic in nature, abstract in nature, right? She doesn't understand the realities of organization. So you can use some of the criticisms which will give more comprehensive answer. Fine. So that is the second B. Second C, again, see, under the NPM framework, public-private partnership challenges the entropy of closed and open models of organization. See, this is very interesting, using systems idea, right? That is why I see conceptual clarity is very interesting, very rewarding, very fruitful for this kind of paper. In fact, you've seen your ethics paper, right, and many other papers you have seen in the exam, the essay paper, you might have understood that how developing capability is more important than merely acquiring the information. Fine, but information bhi chahiye, no doubt, you cannot write it. So let us say under NPM framework, PPP models. See, obviously NPM talks about bringing public-private or promoting private sector practices in government. Fine. So whether it is client charters or citizen charters, right, or it is incentive system, or monitoring performance, evaluation, continuous feedback, जो भी आप बोलो, customer centric orientation, ठीक है? PPP, public-private partnership, challenges entropy of closed and open models of organization. Fine. Now try to understand. When we are saying that if something is private, something is more adaptive, fine, it becomes more like open model. When we say something is traditional, it is more like closed model, right? Entropy. What is the entropy? Entropy is the degree of randomness. So somewhere we believe that the more organizations tend to open, the more tend to interact with environment, right? They are able to understand the competition around them. They are able to adapt to changes. The more stability they will have. Okay, that's a simple idea. So entropy generally is the degree of randomness. It's a concept of system. So if we say that at one end of the spectrum closed and another end is open, fine, government mostly is closed and market and other kinds of mechanisms are more open, adaptive to change. What is PPP? What is public-private partnership? In the classes also, in the enrichment crash course also, we have discussed something called the tool, the model of the network theory. When two systems collaborate with different ideas, mindset, culture, definitely, right, there will be a consequence or impact of this interaction. So let's say public and private interact and they form a public-private partnership. Is it so easy to do? That is the question asking. Does it impact the degree of randomness? Does it impact the collaboration, the stability of the collaboration? Now this question is interesting. This question requires conceptual understanding. This question requires racking your brains a little bit, right? With most of you obviously don't try to. So this question is challenging. It is interesting question and rewarding also, right? Numerous examples could be given. So idea is generally, right, like we discussed in the class, it is state versus market, right? If there is state, right, and definitely there is market, so market is considered to be the alternative of the state, the better alternative of the state. Fine, then how come two systems are collaborating, right? Is it not challenging the core idea of, that is, there is a closed and there is an open model, right? Open is somewhere the opposite of the closed model, but when we are collaborating together, is it not bringing the perspectives, the dimensions of both? So we have to analyze this, that how one system which has different characteristics and how other system which has different characteristics, when they come together, what will be the net characteristics of that system? How PPP is different from P, the private, and P, the public. You understand? That is the question. Or how it is going to impact this collaboration. That is the question. Fine. Interesting question. You could have written, okay, by yes, as the NPM model talks about, or as the NPM evolves itself, fine, and somewhere tries to promote the government or modify the government practices based on private sector, right? It is obvious that some core private sector values will enter the government and somewhere will erode the core values of the government system, like constitutionalism, justice, ethics, equality, public interest, welfare. The orientation, the culture, the mindset of the bureaucrat will be something different. Entrepreneurial bureaucrat, right? A business type of public servant. So obviously this will change the value system, right? How are we going to overcome that? That is the question, right? The lateral entry issue. So when we are promoting lateral entry, right, what is going to happen? The private sector will develop a mindset of public sector, or public sector will get some insights into the private sector. The culture will come from here to there. So nature of corruption will change, right? Nature of what you can say, the politics, internal politics will change. The way they are looking at things will change. Cost benefit analysis is more important now, right? From better economic cost is more important than social cost, and likewise, right? So what is the sacrifice that we are going to make when we are going to do this? So that is the idea. Entropy of it has challenged the existing what you can say, the frame, the continuum, existing continuum, that okay, this is public, this is private, and something this versus this, right? That is the idea. We have done this already in the class. It's a very interesting concept, though we did not use the word entropy, right? Obviously, but entropy, we have used entropy as a model to understand a lot of other things, right? I'm not talking about current students, obviously the last batch students, they will know, right? Next question, third A, right? In conflict situations, in organizations, leadership migrates to the aggressive and relegates the emotionally mature to the background. Discuss. Fine. Is it correct? Right. Normally when we see a lot of leadership theories, if you see this question has the influence of the Fiedler's contingency leadership model, right? So definitely we can use Fiedler's model, right? So many of the leadership models like Fiedler's model, situational contingency theory of leadership, they believe that when situations are, even Gulick and Erwin has also talked about it, right? Many scholars have accepted the idea that when situations are dynamic, when situations are not under control, a strong leadership or a strong controlling leadership is necessary. That is manager or manager type of control. That's better. So the traditional type of model where authority is centralized under the leader, under the manager, that works better. And this is the tendency of most of the organization. And this is the criticism made by many scholars later, that when organizations are going through transition, definitely centralization is necessary, right? Like political party, if it is going through a transition, centralization is necessary. A state is going through transition, centralization is necessary, right? Any organization which is facing new problems, new challenges, right? What it will do? It will try to control the power authority in certain systems. But the moment the organizations need to evolve, they need to respond to the changes outside, what they will have to do? They will have to decentralize the power. See, you can also utilize the same model, headquarter field relationship. if the nature of function needs decentralization, the field must be given more autonomy and not to be centralized by the headquarter. Right? Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, aspirational district program. There are many examples, right, where we need leadership at the lower level. Adarsh Gram Yojana. Right? So it is quite logical that we may not totally agree with this statement, but yes, as per Fiedler's model, as per other models, it is quite clear. If you remember the high LPC and the low LPC model. So high LPC or low LPC models, fine. Let me take one page and help you understand. So if you've seen Fiedler's, you've read about Fiedler's theory, see. So it is obvious that if this is low LPC, this is high LPC. Fine. So in situations which are unfavorable, right, or which are highly favorable. So in these situations, right, the models like low LPC LPC will work. The models where these situations are unfavorable, the low LPC will work. That means obviously if you are more authority centered manager, then you can work very well in highly favorable and highly unfavorable situations. In situations where the is moderately unfavorable or moderately favorable, right, you can use more democratic style of leadership, right? That is the idea, that is the question about. So you could have used Fiedler's model, right, or you could have used in general the leadership theories. Fine. So, right, but in conflict situation, if you use Follett's idea, see, leadership by function, leadership by situation. So even Follett's idea will help us understand. So you can use Fiedler, Follett to analyze this question. Fine. Foundations 3B, foundations of public administration, again new public management. See how many questions are there, right? The foundations of public administration, new public management and public governance rest on the rule of law discussed. It is obvious that the primary purpose of administrative reforms, whether theoretically or practically, the primary target of these reforms is what? To make public administration corruption free, to make public administration efficient, to make public administration proactive, accountable, responsible to public interest, to work for the welfare, development and growth. So what has been the primary concern of all the reforms, right? Starting from public administration to new public management or to the neoliberal perspective, public choice approach, NPM, NPS, NWS, NPG, PVA, whole of government approach, whatever models you use today. All these models are somewhere based on the belief that administrative reforms are needed in order to achieve the goals of public interest. That is the idea. Fine. So as you know, the famous statement, right, every time we write in the classroom, every time questions we ask, right, the famous statement that we use, that what is the raison d'etre for public administration? Fine, the concept of public interest that we study. So raison d'etre for public administration, right, is public interest. So obviously legal rational system, rule of law, right, good governance, ethical governance, all these bases, the very basis from Wilson to all the modern governance perspective rest on one fundamental thing, that public administration has to serve the public interest. How it has to do it? Obviously it has to do it on the foundation of rule of law, not based on procedures. So this question also has, a hidden idea that it is talking about not the procedures of law, but the rule of law. The idea, the philosophy of the rule of law, not rule by law. So rule of law and rule by law, right? These are two different things. Fine. Let's take up third C. The principles of checks and balances count among the most fundamental constitutional values, right? This question is simple. Write about checks and balances, right? We can also compare, but 10 markers. No, this is 15 marker. So definitely you can write what is the idea of constitutionalism. What are the core philosophies of or core constitutional values? Now imagine this question in paper 1, which is obviously directly a concept of paper 2. So obviously there is no distinction now, which makes it more easy. Many of the students can write practically. They don't need to memorize theories and all that, those abstract principles to write. So you can say that yes, one of the core values, fundamental values is accountability, control on arbitrary powers, right? Restriction on unchecked powers of the administration. It's fundamental constitutional value, that is constitutionalism. Question इसके ऊपर है, ये unit 2 paper 2. Fine. Or you can also take this question from accountability and control. That's the idea. So obviously we know that there is the fundamental basis is of accountability, control, right? Public accountability, scrutiny, ethics is based on the core philosophy of constitutionalism. An administration strong enough to be efficient but not strong enough to be unaccountable, right? That is the idea. So accountability should be balanced by efficiency. Fine. So that you can write. Fine. Detailed discussion, like I said, will follow, or you can also keep watching the YouTube channel, right? Or you can go to the Telegram channel, whatever, right? Download the app also, where you might find the answers to this, but it will take almost a week. Let me frame the answers, maybe less than a week, right? But you'll get the answers for them. Fine. Fourth A, delegated legislation should be clear and should confine to the limits determined by legislature, right? It is about delegated legislation, correct? In light of the statement, explain how misuse of administrative discretion can be checked. Why? How misuse of administrative discretion can be checked? See, one of the increasing today, the area or focus of study is administrative law. Administrative law means that let us understand what powers, what authority administration enjoys and how it is going to serve the needs of society. While doing so, let us not allow administration to become arbitrary, unregulated. That is administrative law. For that purpose, obviously, the administrative changes or many other changes will be brought. For example, tribunals will be created. Administrators will play a role like judges, right? Delegated legislation, administrators will make laws. They will not directly make it, but they will participate in making law. So delegated legislation is one of the aspects. If you remember the broad view, the broad view says that yes, the administration is no more the instrument of the executive, but it is very well connected and interacting with the other two organs also, legislature and judiciary. Fine. How misuse of administration? What are the ways of misuse, right? In accountability and control in detail, we have done this question. What are the ways in which the misuse can be done, right? You have malfeasance, right? The administrative discretion, how can it be visible? And let me tell you, all those people who say PABAD, see, PABAD has the primary influence on your ethics paper. Read. See, majority of the questions, if you see in ethics and you see public administration, right? There's a direct correlation. It's not just correlation, right? The same idea and the same ideology, the same perspective is visible in both. Fine. And they have generalized the paper. That's very good, right? Any student with little thinking mind can write these papers, right? So administrative discretion, right? Now, obviously, when you are giving power to make law or delegating the, right? So you also have to look into how they can misuse, right, the administrative discretion. So one, there are committees for subordinate legislation. Right, I'm coming to the aspect we were talking about. Let me first clarify. Then there are committees on subordinate legislation. Then there are legislative mechanisms, right? Monitoring by different committees, public accounts committee, this committee, that committee, ethics committee, even for parliamentarians, so that even they don't misuse their authority, fine, or they don't unduly patronize the administration, fine. Then there are budgetary methods. Then there are what you can say special reports submitted in the parliament, fine, calling attention motions, this. There are various mechanisms by which legislature can make executive accountable or can make administration accountable. In recent years, this mechanism probably is declining. Why? Ordinances are being made, guillotine is being practiced. The committees do not have power to punish the administration. It can merely give advisory role, right? Most of the parliamentary discussions and debates, they have been mellowed down, right? Opposition is not playing effective role. So delegated legislations or lawmaking power of the administration at times is exercised very smoothly without effective scrutiny and monitoring. Complicated nature of laws, yes, okay. So we can involve public participation, we can allow specialist public scrutiny, right? Public opinion. We can also, acquire or hire some third-party think tank institutions to look into the laws, like we have in Singapore, we have in UK, many other countries of the world, where policy making, law making functions are also outsourced. Fine. So we can bring these perspectives and somewhere regulate the unchecked powers of the administration. Now, what kind of activities administration can do? Like we said in the beginning, administration can misuse the authority, malfeasance. It can exceed the jurisdiction, overfeasance, right? It can misinterpret the law, misfeasance, error of fact finding, conflict of interest, right? It can violate the privacy. So there are many what you can say dimensions in which the administration can misuse the law, misuse the discretion, and that is why the need to keep a check on administration and to make such laws that administrators are normally accountable to the laws which have been made, right? The best example could be of RTI. So they are misusing the provisions, right? Even in RTI. So there is long queue. There is a lot of waiting in the RTI applications, right? Jabalpur High Court and many other judgments are there. You can just use it if you have studied them. Fine. Fourth B, leadership is not only taking credit for success but also owning up and being accountable for failures. Correct. That's a very logical statement, right? Coons O'Donnell or Edgar Shane, fine, Cads and Can, most of these scholars believe the idea that leaders are those who are transformative, not transactional. They are not the ones who hog the limelight, but they also have to take upon the baggage of failure. So discuss that, right? You see the present political leadership, right? You see the administrative leadership, how, right? Even the social leaderships, how they are failing to own up to the responsibilities of failure. Majority of them are hogging the limelight for success. So leading by example, right? Leading by accepting your vulnerabilities and failures, like Gandhi. His book, My Experiments with Truth, right? It reveals how vulnerable Gandhi was, and that is why he is a leader. A leader is not God. He cannot be flawless. He cannot be perfect. He has to make mistakes. So talk about it, how organizational leadership requires to lead by example, to face the bullet, to be in the line of fire, and eventually make this process transformational, not transactional. Fine. It's a very interesting question. It's a general question. You can write a lot of things. You can give a lot of examples how administrative leadership has transformed governance. Fine. People's Road. Yeah, there are so many examples you can write, right? A bureaucrat while Kerala floods was in there, or the personal integrity of many of the bureaucrats, right? Except from those who are, highly smart people on social media, right? Apart from that, there are people who are following, observing neutrality, impartiality, leading by example and facing the brunt of the political and social, right, impact. In spite of that, they are going through their own duty. See. Fourth C, bureaucracy constitutes the imaginary state and is the spiritualism of the state. See, it's a very simple question, right? Many of might have to use little brain, but it's no doubt good question, right? We discussed like many times, if you remember, many of you, we have always talked about Marxist and neo-Marxist perspective. Now they are also becoming quite important today. Earlier we had also discussed that these perspectives were not very dominant in public administration. Public administration comes from the capitalist orientation. US and Europe. So this question simply says, what bureaucracy thinks, right? If you remember, if many of you remember who have done the classes or the crash courses, right? We have said there is a model by Nicholas Henry which says, so Nicholas Henry has given a very interesting analysis that it thinks that bureaucrats are rational, society is non-rational. Obviously, if you use Marxist perspective, fine, then what does Marx believes? Marx believes that bureaucracy is the mind of the state. And bureaucracy is the hands of the state. The belief that bureaucracy creates is that it is serving the interest of everyone, though it serves only the interest of the class. See, so bureaucracy constitutes the imaginary state. The bureaucracy creates the perception that it is a collective system serving the needs of the society, while at the same time it is serving the needs of those who are in power, the elites, the wealthy. It basically serves their interest. So bureaucracy is the puppet, is the handmaiden of the powerful elites, wealthy, that is the bourgeois, as per the Marxist analysis. Same is done by neo-Marxist, though neo-Marxists obviously have a better understanding, but let's keep it simple. Also, right, the entire consciousness of the state means what? Whatever state thinks, whatever state does, whatever state intends to do, whatever state reflects its ideas, they are all visible in bureaucracy. So bureaucracy is that instrument, is that system which somewhere manifests the state. It is the face, it is the consciousness, right? It is the ideology, it is the entire thing that probably state wants to do, wants to depict, wants to say, wants to be, is through bureaucracy. When we study Weber, we talk about what is bureaucracy? Rationalization of collective social action. That is the idea. See, Marx is criticizing it. He says, see, what bureaucracy does? It promotes the interest of few as the interest of all. Fine? Ethanol blending E20. You're just seeing what's happening. Or maybe erstwhile Chief Minister of Delhi, Sheila Dikshit's son, who was having a manufacturing unit for meters, auto meters. And this is normal, right? Or this or that or whatever. So the system presents that it is working for public interest, but in reality it is working for its own interest or for the interest of those who have controlled it. That is the elites, bourgeois. Elite capture by bureaucracy, of bureaucracy you can say. So bureaucracy is the consciousness of the state, but it is the consciousness of those who are rich, powerful elites, and they definitely portray themselves as the protector of public interest. So it is a very interesting criticism of Weberian bureaucracy or capitalist or capitalism technically and democracy, right? The criticism of bureaucracy which basically serves the needs of capitalism. Fine, that is the idea. It's a Marxist perspective you could have written by applying little, obviously, effort. Marxist and neo-Marxist post NPM, they are becoming quite important for the exam. Fine. right? So let us see. So that was the question 4, right? Let's go to section B. Section B, let me briefly tell you. Now, 5th A, e-advocacy model of e-governance can facilitate democratization of public policy making. Obviously, e-advocacy means what? The involvement of various non-government actors in policy process. So how? Using technology, right? Digital interfaces, mygov.in or various other platforms which are there, right? Scrutiny by public, right? Use of websites, use of interfaces where people can directly contribute to what? The opinions, reviews, maybe consultation, maybe advices, right? So e-advocacy, whether it is NGO, whether civil society, it can be any format of the non-government organization. So how this e-advocacy providing a better format, a better model of association of people in the policy formulation as well implementation or entire policy process is going to improve it. This is what you have to write. So obviously when you study digital era governance or e-governance, you also accept that digital interface is not just about transforming administration, but it is about involving and empowering the citizens. One of the important mode of empowering citizen is why not use the digital interface to involve them in the governing process. It might have its own dangers and problems, better use them also. Fine. Like second ARC uses the idea, decentralization is not democratization. Use it. Fine. 5th B again, neoliberal policies have enhanced the scope and opportunity of taxation for the government, obviously. Corporate growth, enterprises, diversification of products, investment, technologies, partnerships, right? N number of things you can write. Obviously, government's scope of earning revenue, becoming more entrepreneurial, watching from the margins, not necessarily getting into it, or steering rather than rowing, right? It has definitely improved after the neoliberal policies. Kindly write it. Fine. Fifth C, policy analysis process is limited if possible outcomes and alternative potential policies are neglected. Now see, we have also discussed in the classes, right, or also in the mains program, the McNamara's model of policy analysis, very important, right? So policy implementation, policy analysis, these are the emerging areas. When you say we are making today evidence-based policies, we are shifting from populist policies, public opinion-based policies to more fact-based policies. But it is, the reverse is happening maybe in India and many other countries of the world. What is Trump doing? Right? That kind of tariff acceleration, is it a fact-based policy? Is it an evidence-based policy? No, it's an opinion-based policy. He's politicizing the entire issue. And most of the countries in the world, obviously they have to reflect some popular sentiment. So the question is very interesting. Policy analysis process is limited if possible outcomes and alternative potential policies are neglected, right? So what is the utility of policy analysis? Fine. Reviewing the facts, understanding the evidences, understanding the core data, the statistics, right? And somewhere predicting that this is what we are going to get. Now, one aspect is that if policy analysis is done on the basis of popular agenda, populism, discretion of the party in power, right, or manipulation of the data and facts, what is going to happen? We are going to manipulate the outcome. So eventually the policy analysis will be useless because our feedback, the way we want to improve and reform the further policies, right, they will also fail. So policy analysis requires first the neutral, fair, impartial framework to analyze. Second, data, evidence, facts, statistics. Third, technology. Human interface should be minimum. Fourth, right? If outcomes. Now see, so when you evaluate, generally policy analysis is done, we are focusing with outputs, numbers, data, statistics. Sir, 1000 crore has been spent to make 100 schools, right? But whether the children are being educated or not, whether we have literacy coming out of that school or not, that is not the concern. The concern is only making the school. So see, are we concerned with outcome or output? Output. See, so what should be concerned with? Outcome. And alternative potential policies. Correct, right? When we are implementing policies, we are midway, we are analyzing policy, right? Or we are somewhere in the pre-policy phase. Like Dore uses the concept of meta-policy, right? So once we have made a policy, we have failed or succeeded, we are going for policy reform and analysis, right? So we can also, or we need to also develop alternatives to the policies that we are probably implementing or going to implement. So even before we formulate, or even if we formulate, right, we might always go for the alternatives to the policies that we have developed, right? That is called scenario planning. If, then what? If this happens, right, then we'll do it, or else we'll do it. If that doesn't work, then what? See, so that's called scenario planning in public policy. Fine. So this question is about कि outcomes, facts, data सिर्फ important नहीं है, right? But yes, outcome is equally important. Then whatever policies is being developed, the better analysis would be that we should always be ready with a contingency plan. जैसे disaster management है, fine, communal rights है, rural development programs है, tribal development है, industrial development है, land acquisition है. These are the areas where we need to have a lot of backup plans and the review of the alternative policies as well. Fine. But you can use McNamara's model. It's a very interesting model. Why? That has been taught in the class, or at least you can use, may not use the name itself, but you can understand the stages which are there. Values and ethics in civil services are shaped by global practices and trends. It is obvious, not just this is the reality, but these are shaped by not only global but local, social, ecological, all the impacts. Fine. So when you say United Nations Convention Against Corruption, will it not shape the focus on the good governance in India? When you talk about good governance agenda of World Bank, will it not shape the focus of the governance perspective in India? When you have focus on Human Development Index, multidimensional poverty index, or corruption perception index, right? Or when United Nations talks about women empowerment or the decade of women empowerment, right? Will it not change the way you are governing in your country? Or when we have sustainable development goals, is it not modifying the way we are governing, or somewhere making administration achieve the objectives in our own country? It is obvious that global practices, global trends, knowledge, comparative knowledge from them, right? You can also apply the CP idea. So comparative knowledge and practices has a big influence on the way we modify and improve the governance perspective, right? Or practices in our own country. There are numerous examples like concern with human rights, concern with minority rights, tribal rights, right? Regional development, like I said, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and likewise. Kindly use that idea. So comparative है, ecological है, right? Even ethics भी जो है सिर्फ एक universal idea नहीं है, but yes, there are contextual and universal both the influences on ethical practices in any country. Fine. Right? But values come from within and values come from outside, right? Economic development alone is not sufficient component for women development and empowerment. Correct? You can discuss Panchayati Raj institutions. You can also talk about the strategies for women empowerment, WID, WAD, GAD, right? Development administration and women. So, right, WID, WAD, GAD, women in development, women and development, gender and development. Fine, you will talk about, say, economic empowerment has big impact, no doubt, but economic empowerment is not the only one, right? Today we are talking about obviously political reservation for women or reservation for women in politics, Panchayati Raj ho, chahe higher levels ho, definitely that idea has also been used. So you can use and analyze this part. Let us see. Sixth, again usual question, Riggs आना ही आना है हमेशा. Frederick's Industria interdependent economy is a precursor for some features of postmodern public administration. Analyze. Do you understand the question? Fine. When Riggs is analyzing the societies, traditional, what is this? Industria interdependent economy. Basically, the kind of administrative features Weber analyzes or evaluates under his agraria, transitia, industria model. Fine. Or you can understand this way, that understand it this way, that is economic growth, industrial growth, right, dependent upon the nature of the or growth is dependent upon the nature of politics administration relationship, right? He analyzes this idea, balanced, imbalanced polity and growth. Fine. Now when you think of the traditional society, then you think of the fused model, right, prismatic model and diffracted model. Agraria, transitia, industria. What are these models? These models basically depict the different stages of evolution of society. He also uses various parameters to understand it. Structural, functional approach, ideal type models, right? Ecological perspective, systems view, a lot of things he uses. So its question says, right? So the moment a society evolves, right? The moment society evolves, and what is the basis of the evolution of society? What is Riggs saying? So what is the distinction between underdeveloped, developing and developed? So Riggs' model somewhere believes that what is a prismatic society? The prismatic society is a combination of the underdeveloped and developed features. Postmodern society, right? See, obviously he is talking about the societies which are in the post-globalization phase. Riggs died in 2007, so obviously he talked about a lot of things. So eventually the idea is very clear that yes, there is a transition of society from underdeveloped to developed. They have to go through a system called developing, that is prismatic. The prismatic has components of both developed and underdeveloped. As we move further, right, the development is not a fixed idea. The developed idea or developed society also moves further. Fine, the concept of developed also evolves. And obviously the transitional society or prismatic society keeps evolving in relative to the developed. So in simple way, if US is developed and India is becoming developed, then we cannot say that US is at the same place, the US is stuck at being developed. No, that developed is a dynamic idea, it is also evolving. So this question says that there are certain features, right, of what? The administrative system, which will lead this administrative system from underdeveloped to developing to developed, right? Analyze. What are these features? Integration, differentiation, balanced, imbalanced polity, right? EO, ortho, neo. Fine. Then development, economic growth and the nature of politics administration relationship, right? Development, administration, administrative development, chicken egg typology of Riggs. Talk about these ideas. How integration can be further understood, right? How differentiation and integration are interrelated, right? Structural functional approach, if you want, you can use that also. So you can start with that by see how every society has its features, or every society's ecology is reflected in the administrative features. The administrative system somewhere resembles the level of growth of a society. As the society evolves, in what sense? Political, social, economic, right? Right. The features of the administrative systems also reflect the same thing. As administration evolves, consequently the society also evolves. So a developed society's administrative system and a developing society's administrative system will have distinct features, but one is the precursor of the other. That's the idea. So ये बहुत बड़ा criticism भी है that linear Riggs model is a linear model. It believes that we will be underdeveloped, then we will be developing, and then we will be developed. It is not that simple. Our developing is different from Pakistan as developing. We developing is different from Bangladesh as developing, right? And logically, developing itself is not a homogeneous criteria. So if you want, you could have used it, right? Like Han Bin Lee. The criticism by Han Bin Lee, right? That Riggs model is basically equilibrium model. Fine, there is no clarity. The model that he talks about, right? Integration, differentiation, mall integration. Fine, how these features work. Do they work for every society in the same manner, right? Is developing a homogeneous category? So kindly talk about these things. Your answer will be complete. Don't overdo it. Like I said, talk about basic ideas, what Riggs methods are, how Riggs approaches a developed and comparison of developing, underdeveloped and developed society, what he believes are the features of administrative system, how developing administrative system features are precursor to developed. Why? Because it comprises of both the underdeveloped and developed. This is what you had to write. Fine. Sixth A. 6B, the role and responsibility of the state in development process has been overemphasized and given undue importance, critically examined. Kindly criticize the monopolization of development and welfare by the government. It can be done from public choice perspective, from neoliberal perspective, from NPM perspective, or in general, right? The critical perspective by Habermas, many of these scholars, or simply you can just criticize monopoly, right? Monocentrism by the government. 6C. Affirmative action for equal opportunity is a cornerstone in recruitment to public services. Obviously, talk about the principles of recruitment, right? How fairness and justice in recruitment can be ensured, gender justice can be ensured, a parity of gender pay gap or gender pay gap can be overcome, parity can be established, how different initiatives have been taken, right? Many countries in the world, they have taken a lot of initiatives, especially US. When you see there is Equal Opportunities Commission in India, we are not specifically focusing on that, but yes, there are many states which have horizontal reservation for women. Fine. Then we are also trying to, obviously, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and we are trying to somewhere equalize the gender inequality which is visible in economy, public employment, army, and many other areas, right, which were hitherto or till now considered to be the domain, exclusive domain of the males. So we are trying to do that, right, promoting gender, budgeting, and likewise. So kindly, so affirmative action is about, right, not just about women, but yes, about women, minorities, this, you can talk about every community, right, which promotes, right. Today, recently we are talking about EWS and all this, though obviously you do not have, it's a 15 marker, yes, you can analyze also that many of these things also need to be reviewed periodically, and there is need for greater scrutiny considering the kind of mishappenings that have happened with the UPSC. Fine. Seventh question. Let's take red, huh? It's boring now, black. Seventh, right? The objective of LPG and of new public management was to limit government functions and reduce public expenditure. How both functions and expenditure has increased account for the paradox, right? That's obviously the paradox of privatization or NPM. Okay, dilemma of development bhi bol sakte hain. See, when we are focusing on regulation, when we are focusing on steering and not rowing, not monopolizing, there are many other things which are needed, right? For example, we need specialists, we need technocrats more. They will be hired, they need a lot of salaries. We need technology, yes, fine. NPM karna bhi technological improvement chahiye, technological upgradation chahiye, budget chahiye. Then we are subject to hacking, we are subject to security issues, data breaches and all those things, big data problems, we need, firewall protections for them also. Then, as NPM and the neoliberal movement becomes more prominent, we have to use technology, that is digital era governance. That is also costly. Fine. Then, skill, manpower. You cannot ask public servants to compete with those private professionals, right, without having the skill building, training, capacity development, right, awareness and knowledge regarding new technologies, new knowledge, whatever, AI and all those things. So the more we tend to privatize, the more we tend to compete with the private sector, the more we tend to become professional in civil services, right? The more we talk about ethics, the more we talk about morality, public services, probity, accountability, good governance, e-governance, citizen-centric governance, the more costly, right? Or the more fiscally, right? Financially challenging this process is. So the idea is that whether privatization has actually reduced the budget of the government, no. If you see, the gross state fiscal deficits have increased. The combined center-state fiscal deficit is quite high, right? The debt management is quite weak. Expenditure management is quite weak, right? We need to upgrade. The expansion of population, right? And still the 70% of the population dependent on direct public administration. So nowhere in these developing countries the expenditure of the government is declining. This is the paradox. The more we privatize, the more secure we have to be, the more regulation we need, the more customer protection we require, the more lokpals we need, the more SEBI we need, the more RBI we need, and we need also Competition Commission of India, NCLT and many other things. Fine. The more exposed we are to the world, the vulnerabilities, right? The perfect examples, as you know. Fine. The king of good times, Kingfisher and Lalit Modi and Choksi and so many others. So there are a lot of vulnerabilities that come with LPG reforms, right? We have globalized without privatizing. That's a drawback, right? Our internal private sector did not develop and we allowed the outsiders to enter. So there are price indeterminacy, right? There are other issues like rigs. We have talked about bazaar canteen model, right? A coexistence of underdeveloped and developed markets at the same time. Grey markets are developing. Price sensitivity is high, but then quality sensitivity is very low. That's quite visible in the coaching industry as well, everywhere, right? Not just coaching. Fine. So logically, see, you can use these ideas and criticize it. Functions have increased, expenses have increased, technological upgradations have increased, skills are required, professionalism, manpower, बहुत कुछ है. Local government को भी digitize करना है. And fine. The basis of comparative public administration has evolved from institutional approach to contemporary political economy process. Right? Obviously, how are we comparing initially institutional approach? क्या है? System. What is system? Bureaucracy. What are we comparing? The administrative system to the administrative system. The developed countries' administrative system, that is bureaucracy, to the developing countries' bureaucratic system or administrative system that was technically not bureaucratic but colonial bureaucracy. We were comparing them, trying to find out what are the features which are different and trying to fit them. Initial stages of comparison. Right? Obviously, later on the comparison becomes more behavioral. We are trying to compare policies. We are trying to compare politics. We are trying to compare the impacts of policies, the administrative behavior, culture, right? Many other factors, ecology. We are comparing all those things today, right? Local, regional, national. So the scale of comparison, right? The factors of comparison, they have evolved drastically. And it is no more about just the procedures, rules, features, regulation. No. It is no more about the comparison between one structure and another structure, right? We have moved beyond that. So talk about the ideas, how Riggs, Gauss, Dahl, many scholars, right? Berger, Luckman or initial scholars who were there, how they started with basic understanding. Then Riggs obviously develops the comparative study, then Farrell-Hedy develops it, and later on Merle-Fenshaw develops it, and then new CPA emerges, Carl S. Jung comes into picture, many other scholars come, right? And Hanbin Lee, and they definitely somewhere improve the comparative perspective. right? NPA 3 talks about comparative perspective in what? In more evolved sense. Today we are not just comparing systems, designs, structures. No, we are moving beyond them. Fine. So आपको यही लिखना है कि CPA today has now evolved more. Development of theory of comparative, how, see, the basis has changed, right? Have all these approaches enabled the development of theory of comparative public administration? Obviously. From bureaucratic approach to the modern behavioral approach to public policy perspective to this perspective, right? Political reforms perspective, they all have definitely shaped the way we understood the Western versus non-Western. Today we are understanding non-Western to Western. Earlier we were only understanding Western to non-Western. Today we are understanding concept of exchange, multicultural perspective, right? Postmodern perspective in comparative public administration, gender perspective in comparative public administration. We are using multiple frameworks to understand the nature and role of public administration. So simplify कर लो कि भाई comparison तो हो ही रहा, right? But scale, magnitude and the factors of comparison, they have drastically changed. Fine. 7C ये भी क्वेश्चन हमने किया कई बार, right? Can competency mapping be linked to career development incentivize civil servants' commitment to efficiency? Obviously, when we are evaluating or when we are going for performance evaluation, that is more skill based, right? You have to start with the idea that Peter's principle, if you know, in government the promotions are not based on merit. Merit is a myth in bureaucracy. You can start somewhere from here. The low performers and high performers, in fact, both are rewarded equally. The low performers are having better political patronage, like second ARC talks about cherry picking of bureaucrats. So politicians pick and choose those who help the politicians. Fine. Start from there. Then why the performance appraisal models are weak in the government? ACR model, then ACR to APAR or APAR model, then to performance management system, 180 degree, 360 degree, 720 degree, whatever models of evaluation you can use. Fine, we are also using EPG models, right? Today we are talking about Sparrow, online basically performance appraisal systems. So bring all that perspective, right? How we are focusing on outcome based evaluation. So today's model, competency mapping, definitely will help in fitting the right person to the right job. Also evaluating the individual contribution, not necessarily contribution based on merely the service in which one is. It will also improve somewhere the rank based system into more position based system or generalist dominated system to more or better specialist run system. So it will help in so many other things. Second ARC is a direct question. Hey. Fine. 8th A. The effectiveness of civil society in development process is only when state institutions are receptive to inputs from civil society. Right? See, directly in the class we have discussed, I think once, not once, many times, that civil society in India, as per Nirja Gopal Jal, right, as per other scholars, right, who's that, Atul Kohli, fine, or that Kothari. So civil society in India or in many countries, not just in India, right, is generally not constructive. It is emerging in opposition to the government. Lokpal movement क्या है? Anti-corruption movement. किसके against है? Government के अंदर. See, it's not just about corruption, against corruption. It is basically against government. So most of the civil society movements, most of the uprising, political movements are basically against government. So they have not constructive role to play with the state. Fine. So one problem emerges is that there is a discontent between civil society and the state. And this discontent has to be overcome. So there is need for constructive engagement of civil society with the government. Both can work together, right? When you talk about Ajivika, fine, or National Rural Livelihood Mission, National Livelihood Mission, SHG Federation, SHG Bank NGO linkage, right? SHG Bank, SHG NGO linkage. When you are talking about these models, आप क्या कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे? What are you doing? You are basically trying to understand that how civil society, community-based organizations and governments can collaborate and run together. That is called co-governance model. Right? It can also be used as new public governance model. So how they collaborate, how they work together, and how they are able to contribute. So this is the idea. So start with how most of the civil society movements, they emerge as a response to the failure of the government or the space which is left vacuum by the government. Bureaucratic corruption, political corruption and all that. Over the time, the association of state with civil society is very important. So it should not be versus, but it should be with civil society. Talk about this idea, media, bring all those aspects, NGOs. There are many programs which we have launched today with the help of them. CSR, corporate social responsibility, another way. Fine, it's like a neo-civil society movement, right? It's like a remodification of the civil society or community-based approaches. So, responsible neoliberal government इसको बोलते हैं, responsible neoliberal model. Fine. 8th B, evaluate the role and scope of tacit knowledge and personal experience as an important source of knowledge in policy making. See, we have discussed time and again that one is rationality, fact-based knowledge, other is heuristics. Fine. Discretionary knowledge, the knowledge based on experience, one's wisdom, culture, value system, and many other factors. Fine. Intuitionism. When we study public interest, one of the first philosophies we study is intuitionism. So that's correct. Intuition, traditional knowledge, traditional wisdom, traditional medicine ho, practices ho, governance ho, local governance ho, everywhere this is used. So public policies, government decisions, right, bigger problems can also be solved not merely by technical, scientific, statistical analysis, but can also be understood and solved by intuition, wisdom, faith, belief, traditional experiences and so many other things. See, every traditional society would be resolving conflicts. Every traditional society would be managing resources. It had, Cordelia talks about management practices long back. So you cannot rule out that yes, people have within them the ability to understand things, comprehend them and take decisions. It's not necessary that we should have a robot or an AI telling us what decision to be made. So in spite of evidence-based model, fact-based models, we cannot rule out the human intelligence, the intuitive knowledge. Fine, that is what we are training AI to be today. So think about this idea, think of traditional wisdom, right? The indigenous people, the cultural practices, a lot of wisdom which is visible in religion, in culture, right? In traditions and practices, ethos, values, normative aspects, they are equally important? Yes, they are. Robert Dahl, right? Waldo, many scholars are there who believe that even normative knowledge, value-based subjective knowledge equally has a big influence in administrative systems, and they should also be used. New public administration talks about this. Fine. Phenomenological perspective, NPA as phenomenology talks about it. Right, it also tells us how this is very important, because in a country like India, right, we cannot exactly rationalize everything. A decision maker, policy maker has to take into so many factors, right? All these factors cannot be rational. Public opinion matters, community wisdom matters, knowledge matters, contextual factors matters. Write it. The efficacy of management aid tools depend upon the purpose and appropriateness of the tools and technique. Explain example. Obviously, there are multiple tools. MIS हो गया, PERT हो गया, CPM वो basic question है, right? E-governance हो गया, ICT हो गया. Obviously, these tools, to a large extent, are the means. They are not the end. ONM, MIS, PERT, CPM. You can take few of them. They are the means and not the end. That is the question. The question does not only say that you can write about all of them, but yes, you can write. Fine. So how effective they are, to what extent they help in promoting efficiency, productivity, accountability, responsibility, openness, transparency, fine, and many other things. So write about it. At the same time, also use the idea that they are mostly means, they are not the end. So they are tools of governance and good governance, right? They are not the end of governance and good governance. That is the idea. So paper was simple, as right, I don't need to keep saying it, seems immodest. But as you know, all those who have studied, all those who know us, right, all those who have right access to the classes and notes, they know that majority of these questions, right, obviously none of these questions you cannot solve, except I would say few are tricky, they require little application of mind, but majority of the questions you can solve. So it's obviously an easy paper in that sense. For people who have focused more on mugging and information gathering, I would say the paper would seem to be little tough, because they need language, they need writing skills, they also need some conceptual clarity. Fine, because understanding question sometimes is a challenge, but you see this time paper is quite easy as UPSC has kept it. Paper 2 is also very easy, and in fact it is in the same orientation as the predictions we have made or normally a person can think of. So both the papers, paper 1 obviously is conceptual, paper 2 is, like I said, is quite simple. It's a straightforward questions, maybe with apart from 22 questions, only 2 questions seem to be little, right, which obviously is an option. So when you look at the papers, both the papers, you have enough options, you can choose the questions, write it very well. Yes, you have to apply a little brain, you have to apply thinking abilities, you need to have theoretical conceptual understanding very well, you need to have good command over the vocabulary of subject. I'm not talking about English language, fine. In that sense you can do very well, fine. So thank you so much all of you for listening, right, it's already past 10, 15 minutes past 10, so it was fine talking to you. I know this was done at last minute, but still many of you might be might be benefiting from it, right, and it might be beneficial to you. We will try to make detailed video also, or at least we'll give you the answers, fine. Not now, please don't pester me, but we'll definitely give you. Fine, all the description details are there in the description. Anyone who wants to look into the solutions or look into this video again or have any doubts regarding that can definitely reach out to us, right. All those who have written mains, definitely they can come and ask us their doubts. Fine, see you then. Thank you so much for listening. Good night. Tomorrow we'll come up with the paper 2 analysis at the same time almost. Thank you. Good night to all of you. See you. Take care.